to another video. This is the third time I'm recording this video because every other time something went wrong. So I'm sorry if I'm a bit faster because I've done this multiple times now, so I might go a little bit faster because I remember doing something even though I haven't done it. So sorry about that. But today we are going to be doing a tutorial on how to make Flappy Bird inside of Delphi. I'm going to be using Rad Studio 11, but if you have any other way of accessing Delphi, then you can code it there. And also, if you don't want to use Delphi and you want to use a different coding language, then feel free to try and translate what I'm writing into whatever language you're using. So for instance, if you're using C++, then you could probably write this using the C++ editor, because file new, as you can see, there's one for Delphi, Windows VCL application Delphi, and there's one for C++. But obviously we're going to be using Delphi. So if you enjoy this video and you want to see more like this, then consider liking and subscribing, because if we get 50 likes on this video, then I will be making a part 2, because this is part 1. And in part 1, we're going to make the startup screen, which is with the start and exit button, and we're going to make the basic player movement. Alright, so let's get into it. File, new, Windows VCL application Delphi. That's what you want to do, unless you're using something else. But for those who want to follow along, Windows VCL application Delphi. Now it'll bring up with this, and there are 3 things that you need to know here. There's the structure, which shows everything that's inside of the form. There's the object inspector, which lets you change certain factors about the thing you selected. For instance, I've selected the form, and now I can change the height, width, name, and everything else. And then there's the palette, which is where you access all of your objects that you want to add into the form. Okay, so let's start off by saving it. This is the first thing you want to do. So file, save all, not save project as, not save as, not save, save all. And then find a place where you want to save it. So I'm going to go documents, IT, my stuff, and I'm going to create a new folder named Flappy Bird. As you can see, I have done it before, so let me actually delete this. New folder and Flappy Bird. I can put a space. Okay. Now let me get rid of this and let's name it FRM for form, capital F Flappy, capital B Bird, underscore U because it is a unit. As you can see, it says Delphi unit, so I'd go underscore U. Then it'll bring up a project, dproj, and I do the same thing, form, Flappy Bird, underscore P this time because it's a project, and then save that. Now this is just nice because whenever you want to save your work, you just click save all and you don't need to go through that whole process again. Also, just keep in mind this application does not save your progress automatically, so you're gonna have to save manually, and this is just a warning for those who might not save and then they lose all their work. So be careful of that. I've done that many times. Alright. So let's start off by just clicking on the form and searching in the object inspector for name. This name is what appears in the structure, but not on the actual form. It will at first, but you can change it. So this is just what we call it for the coding and for the structure. So let's just call it FRM Flappy Bird. Also with name, you cannot use spaces because it is a naming convention and it's part of the syntax. So now, as you can see, when you run the application, it's going to say FRM Flappy Bird, which doesn't look very nice at all. So now we can actually change what you physically see in the application. By instead of going to name, we go to caption. This is what the person sees. So Flappy Bird. Now we can use spaces because it is a string. Alright, so now when you run the application, we've got the basics done. Your application says Flappy Bird, and it all looks great. So now let's start with the buttons. I'm going to show you how to make 2 different ways of making an exit button. First of all, the first way, which I'm going to be using, is by using a normal button, but you can also do this with a bit button. So let me show you both of them. The bit button is easier because you don't need to code anything, but I just prefer to make a normal button. So let's name this btn close, and let's name this btn exit. Now let me show you how this works. So for the bit button, you want to go search for kind, and then under kind you can just go close. Now this codes everything for you. In fact, it even adds this little visual thing over here. So now when you click on the button, it'll just close the form. Then for this one, you're going to have to code one line. So just go to caption and then make it close. This is that it just looks nice. This is close. A double click on the button to open up the coding section. So double click, and now here it makes a procedure, which is you clicking the close button. So now what we want to code in here is just frm Flappy bird dot close, and it's as simple as that. Now as you can see, it will also close the form. So that these are the two ways of making a close button, but like I said, I'm going to be keeping this one. So if you want to keep this one, then sure, it doesn't really matter. So let me close that. Alright, now for the start button. Let's just grab another normal button. You can't use a bit button for this, or you can, but bit buttons are made for a certain use case and we're not using that, so it would be a waste. Alright, so let's go to name again. Always start with name, and let's call this btn start, and then let's go to caption and just say start. Now this button has no coding in it right now, so let's change that. Double click on it, and all we need the button to do now is to hide these two buttons. Obviously later in the next parts, we're going to make it do other things such as start the game, start the gravity, start everything else. But right now, there's nothing else to change, so all we need to do is hide these two buttons. So what we'll do here is go btn start dot visible is equal to false. This makes sure that when you click the button disappears. Then we can do the same for the other one. btn close dot visible is equal to false. Now, as you can see, let me start this program up. When I click start, the buttons will disappear, which is exactly what we want. So there we go. That's the start screen done. Now, obviously, you can do other things, such as change the font and make it look all pretty, however you want it to look. Because you can change font size, you can change the font, the actual font that it's using by clicking on the three dots over here. You can change the size, you can make sure it has bold, italics, underlined, got a line through it. Everything else you can change, but I'm not going to be doing that because I'm fine with this. Okay, so we have this done. Now it's time for the player. This is where it gets a bit confusing because you're going to need to do quite a bit more coding, but it's fine. So search shape in the palette, and let's just double click on that and move it over to the left. This is going to be the player. Now, I recommend you keep it to the same size I'm making it, because it's going to get confusing if you don't make it the same size as mine, because the size of the cube actually matters later when making the hitboxes. So I'm going to make it 33 by 33. I've done this every single other time. It's just a nice size. So let's put that over here. And now let's go name and call it SHP for shape and player. And then there is no caption to change because it's an object, so it doesn't have any letters on it. Alright, so now we have our player. Now, what do we want to do? We want to make the player jump and fall down. That is all we're going to do for this part. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. We're going to be using timers, so grab a timer, double click on it. And we're going to be using one timer for gravity, and copy paste that, Control-C, Control-V, and one timer for the jumping. So let's name this TMR for timer and jump. This is going to be the jump timer. Now name this one TMR for timer and gravity. Alright, now that we have that done, double click on the background of the form for now, and let's just do a nice simple measure, which is by going double buffered is equal to true. This is actually quite important because it makes sure that the objects in your form don't flicker and bug whenever they move, because this just makes sure that every single time the form refreshes, it makes sure that everything is visible, which is very nice. So it's just something very nice to have. If you don't have it, you're going to notice very ugly things going on. Okay, so now let's get input. This is where you have to start coding. So you see on the left here, it says properties. Instead, click on events. And now, as you can see, there are going to be lots of events of when you move your mouse, when you click something, when you double click on the background of the form, when you close the form. You can start different events all over these, but all we're going to be using is on key press, not on key down, on key press. So click on here and double click on the empty space. And over here, we're going to make an if statement. So if key is equal to not apostrophe.
Bruh.
What's that thing called?
Bruh.
I can't remember.
Bruh.
So that thing, W, and then that again. And now that's just checking if you've pressed the key W. But we're going to add some extra measures. So put these in brackets and type in OR, and then open bracket again. Key is equal to capital W. This just makes sure that if someone accidentally has caps lock on, it'll still work. And then finally, this is where we check if you're pressing the spacebar. So OR key is equal to 32, because space is 32 on the ASCII table. So that is why this is, yeah. Alright, then type in begin on the line after and click enter, and then it'll create a begin and end, which is very helpful. And now let's make it so that when you press W, it makes sure that the timer of jumping dot enabled is equal to true, and the timer gravity dot enabled is equal to false. Now that seems kind of weird, just getting rid of gravity, but don't worry, it's just a timer. It's not actually gravity. So this just makes sure that the force pulling your object down gets disabled and the force pulling your object up gets enabled. So let's code in what actually happens when you jump. So double click on timer jump, and let's type in here if I is smaller than I height, then and then begin. Now obviously we don't have anything declared for I, and we have nothing added to I height, so these two variables mean absolutely nothing. So come to the top, and under var over here, make a new line and go I, comma, I height, colon, integer. This just declares these variables as integers. And now we can say what they actually are. As you can see, the errors disappeared, but they still have no value attached to them. So go under the form create. It's also easier if you just double click on the form again, and it'll bring you straight there. Wait, there you go, brings you straight there. And now over here, type in I is equal to 1. And then I height, just for now, let's make it equal to 7. So you can change this whenever you want to decide how high the object is jumping. Now what you want to write, come back here and say shape player dot top. This is where it is vertically on the form. So anything along here is where it is on the top form. So shape player dot top is equal to shape player dot top plus 1, let's say. And then obviously what else we want to do is I is equal to I plus 1. This just makes sure that I starts off as 1, and 1 is obviously lower than 7, so then it moves your object up 1. Then I becomes 2, then it moves the object up 1, then it becomes 3, and then as soon as it becomes 7, then it stops doing this. So it only moves your object up 7 times, and then it'll stop. Now obviously when it stops, we want it to do something else. So come here and type else begin. And now we want to type timer jump dot enabled is equal to false, and timer gravity dot enabled is equal to true. And this just reverts what was happening before. So now that we've got that all set up, let's test it out. Now this went wrong the last time, so excuse me if there are any technical difficulties. But if I press W, as you can see, it's incrementally going down. It's very hard to see, but the object is going down. Now we don't want it to go down. So let's come back here and let's make this minus instead. Alright. Now as you can see, when we start this and we press W, the object will incrementally move upwards. But as you can see, it's very slow, very jerky, not nice at all. So let's go back to the timer jump, and let's go to properties and make the interval 10. This just makes the timer happen much faster, so you'll see a much bigger difference. Now let's test it out. Let me press W.
Bruh.
Alright, something very important. this is why I was going wrong. I'm very sorry about this. Come to the form create and make sure that both timers are disabled at the start of it. So timer jump dot enabled is equal to false, and timer gravity dot enabled is equal to false. Okay, now this should fix everything. So run it again and press W.
Bruh.
Okay, so let's test it out. Let's run it, click start, and when I press W, as you can see, it bounces up a slight bit. But it doesn't jump up that high, and we want it to jump up much higher than that. So let's change the height. Let's make it something like 30. Now let's rerun it and test it out again. As you can see, it jumps much higher, but it still is quite slow. And that is not the height's fault. That is the increment we set, which is over here. So let's give that a variable instead. Let's make it I increment. And now let's declare that over here. So write comma I increment. And let's make that something like, come to form create and make I increment is equal to, and let's just make it 4 for now. And let's test that out. Let me click play, and when I click start, and now when I press W or space, as you can see, it jumps up way too high. So let's bring that down a little bit. Let's make it something like 3. Try it again. Click start, press W, and it still jumps up a little too high. So let's just bring it down one more, and now this should be perfect. Let's test it out. And look at that. Very smooth movement. Perfect. So now we have the movement of jumping. But we don't have anything pulling our object down, as you can see. Nothing's happening. So let's get that sorted. Double click on timer gravity, and now let's start making the gravity. And this is very simple, very easy to do. What we're just going to be doing is making sure that the shape player dot top is equal to the shape player dot top minus the I increment. We're going to be using the same variable. And now let's make it so that when you click start, it starts the gravity timer as well. So TMR gravity dot enabled is equal to true. Okay, now let's test it out. Let's click start. And as you can see, it's moving our object up. And that's because I said minus again. Remember how we said minus for when the object is moving up. So now we need to write plus for when it's going down. And we have the same problem with very slow jerky movement. So click on timer gravity, and let's just change the interval to the same one as the jump, which is 10. And now let's test this out again. Start, and as you can see, our object is moving down. And when you press W, it continues moving down. So press W and it goes down. But now as you can see, when you press W again, it doesn't go up again. And that's because we have a little fault over here. And that is because at the end over here, we also need to write that I is back to equaling to 1. So that when you press W again, then it can start this whole thing again with I being 1. So now let's test it out. Click start, and as you can see, the object moves down, and when you press W, the object bounces around. And this is perfectly exactly what we want. One more thing that we should do is that, as you can see, when you click start, you can already see the player, but you don't want to see the player in the startup screen. So let's double click on the form for form create and make sure that you can't see the player when it starts up. So shape player dot visible is equal to false. But then, as you can see, when you start it and you click start, you still can't see the object. So let's code it into the start button that shape player dot visible is equal to true. And now, as you can see, you will not be able to see the player when you open up the application, but when you click start, you can see the player. All right, so that is all for part 1. In part 2, I'm going to be doing the pipes and their movement across the screen, and also random generation of the pipes, so that your terrain will always be interesting. I will also probably be doing a options menu, because that is also quite a long process. And then in the final part, I'm going to be doing collision, because that deserves a whole part to itself. So thank you for watching. Like I said, if you enjoyed this video, then please consider liking and subscribing. 50 likes and I'll make a part 2. Thank you. Goodbye.